Hi, my name is Avia Lokai. I'm the program manager for CTEDD, the Center for Transportation Equity, Decisions, and Dollars. I just wanted to make sure that everyone can hear me and can see the PowerPoint screen. So if any of you could send me a quick message on the chat option saying that you can hear me and you can see the screen, that would be great. Okay, great. All right, so I'm just going to start the webinar here. I also want to note that there is a Q&A option that should show up on your screen where you can type in any questions that you might have throughout the webinar, and then I will get to them hopefully at the end. And then again, I'll also allow for any other questions that you might have. So feel free to type in whatever comments or questions you might have, and then we can address them at the end. So just to start, we're a university transportation center called the Center for Transportation Equity, Decisions, and Dollars. I'm sure some of you have in some capacity worked with us before, but today we're going to talk about an upcoming, actually a sent out RFP. We sent it out last week, and we're going to talk about some of the requirements and some of the updates we've had based on the U.S. Department of Transportation. So for starters, this RFP is usually issued annually, and we had one issued last year and the year before, and we had a bunch of projects. You can now also check out the kind of projects that were awarded on our website. This RFP has eligibility for full-time faculty, research faculty, and postdocs. So you can be PIs. And your co-PIs can be, of course, whoever you deem fit. And there's no limit on the number of co-PIs you have. But we require just one PI, and they need to be at least one of these categories. And they can be from UTA, from University of South Florida. They can be from Wisconsin-Madison, California Polytechnic Institute, and Georgia Institute of Technology. So you have to be from any of these institutes to be able to be a PI on these projects. Like was mentioned in the email, all proposals must contribute to the CTEDD general grant objective, which is mentioned in the request for proposal, and overall CTEDD focus areas, which are also mentioned there. The research projects must focus on transportation and represent a potential to convert transportation research into practice, inform researchers and non-academics, help to shape national and international conversations on transportation research, and respond to the needs of practitioners and policymakers. This round, we are going to be awarding between $65,000 to $150,000 of projects, and higher funding will be provided to those that have more collaboration, and I'll get to that in a bit. So one of the main new components, we've had this component before too, but we've updated quite a bit in this round. It's the technology transfer component, and this is a mandatory requirement from the U.S. Department of Transportation. And how we're going to go about for this round is for each researcher, before they set out to write this proposal, to assess what their technology readiness is. And for that, I'm going to quickly click on this link. So let's just hope it's sharing. Okay. So can everyone see the technology readiness level guidebook? I want to make sure that I'm sharing the right things. Just any quick message if I can get. Yes, okay, great. So this is a guidebook that I've also attached to the RFP, and it's pretty thorough, and it explains what technology readiness is, and it's from the U.S. Department of Transportation, and it's basically from the Federal Highway Administration. And this is something a lot of U.S. DOT researchers and other transportation researchers use. So basically, it talks about what technology readiness is and why they've added that component. I'm just gonna go real quick. You can read this on your own, but basically, it's for researchers to evaluate their own project in terms of technology readiness. And what does that even mean? So it talks about what is a TRL, how can we prepare for the assessment, and how can you conduct a successful TRL assessment, and then what are some results and what do they mean? So, so here it says there are formal metrics that support assessments of a particular technology and provide the ability to consistently compare levels of maturity between different types of technologies. So basically, what phase is your research in terms of being able to create a technology and disseminate that technology? And this might be a little bit easier for engineering PIs, but with policy and planning, you might find it a little bit challenging. But in this way, your equivalent would be like a policy itself, a guidebook. It could be anything that you think that you can disseminate to either policymakers or to civic groups or local governments, things like that, which can actually influence policy and change policy. So that's your technology for planners or for policymakers. And for engineers, of course, this guidebook is pretty engineering oriented. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about what the TRL is. Again, you can read that on your own time, but basically you can use this to identify technical gaps in your technology, like what is out there, what is the literature gap out there that your research is adding on to. You can perform a rough portfolio analysis in terms of how advanced your item is, or how advanced your technology is, and what phase it's in, and serve as a shorthand when discussing a project status internally and externally. So, we want you to note that this could be your technology readiness will be assessed throughout your project, even beyond your research phase. So you will assess your technology readiness now, then you will assess it after you're done with your project, then with your research phase, then you will assess it maybe later on when you've actually started disseminating some of your research and holding meetings and webinars and publications and things like that. And then, so on and so forth. So it just depends on your individual project. Now, these are the different scales of the project. Basic research needs to have basic principles, and research, application formulated, and proof of concept. And then your applied research is components. They're tested in a lab environment, so it could be a simulated environment in your case. It could be demonstrated in the integrated components are demonstrated in a lab environment. And then your development phase is actually testing out that technology in the real environment, in the real field. And then your implementation is actually adopting that policy or technology. So those are the phases that it's divided into. And based on what we had discussed in the RFP, we need the research to be at least gone through level 3. So you need to be at this phase during the proposal for us to be able to fund your project. So these are all the levels of readiness. So this is basic principles in research. Do basic scientific principles support the concept? So, does your literature support the concept? Has the technology development methodology or approach been developed? How are you planning to create this final product? Application formulated. Are potential system applications identified? Again, this is very technical, but it basically says, how are you planning and how are you making sure you're going to disseminate it successfully? Then you have your proof of concept. Does it introduce anything? Is it an innovation? Does it add to something? And how are you going to make sure that you are also testing it out? So are you, for example, again, I'm going to keep using policy examples because they're going to be a little bit tougher, but are you going to be, do you have a meeting already in place with a local government official or a civic group or a policymaker that might be interested in your project and how they are going to utilize that project? And then we move on to level 4 and 5. This is lab environment. So, for example, you have a guidebook that you created out of your research. Are you going to test it out on a specific demographic, or are you going to test it out in? It's going to be like a controlled study that you're going to do of your guidebook or your policy or whatever it might be. And then again, you test all components in that same environment. And then you move on to the development, which is you actually refine it based on the feedback that you received from your civic groups or local governments or stakeholders, whoever they might be. And does it satisfy all the requirements that they have? And then you are ready to kind of put it out there. For example, you might be collaborating with your local DOT. So, your guidebook or workshop or whatever it might be is ready to be, or your policy is ready to be, tested and presented to your local DOT, or the local DOT is ready to present it to some other stakeholders. And so this is like the main dissemination phase. And then it says, okay, so now the people who have you presented this work to like it and they want to use it. So that's the proven and operational environment. So they're actually going to be adopting it now. And then this is actually policy change has happened. So this is a very, very high level, and and it's not going to happen in a year. It might not happen in 2 years. This might happen in 3 or 4 years, where you have a policy, like you have a policy in mind, and you want to have a specific local government or transit agency or DOT adopt it, and they like it, and they say that we're actually going to change something in our bylaws or something in our services based on what your research had. So that's the ultimate kind of technology transfer readiness that you've achieved. And that's what we're looking for. We're trying to see how can your project create tangible impact. And that's what the U.S. Department of Transportation is constantly asking us, and asking us to report. So our projects always need to consider the impact, which a lot of you already do, but then also keep track of that impact, because a lot of times the research phase finishes and then that's it, you're not keeping track. But we would like through this process for you to be able to keep track and make sure that, okay, have I followed up with these groups? What are the conversations like? Some of them will be implemented, some of them won't be. Of course, we're not going to be unrealistic about all of them being implemented, but we would like all projects to consider this, because impact is very, very, very important to the U.S. Department of Transportation. So I'm going to go back to the slideshow real quick. So this is the technology transfer component. This was the readiness level. And I would suggest for now to also maybe talk to your executive committee members. So if, for example, if you're University of South Florida, then Dr. Albertini. If you're in Georgia Tech, then Dr. Subro. If you're in Wisconsin-Madison, then Carolyn McAndrews or Sue Ann might be people that you want to talk to, or even Teresa Adams. And then UTA, you can come talk to us, Dr. Hamidi, or you can even talk to Dr. Anand Pupala, because he's done a lot of these projects based on the technology readiness level. So it might seem a little bit confusing, but this assessment is important, and the questions that we ask in the RFP reflect that assessment. We also are working on getting a T2 assistant director for each campus. So for the proposal writing phase, we don't have anyone confirmed yet. So again, like I said, I would suggest for you to contact your executive committee member. But after your proposals are submitted and we're in the research phase, that's when you actually have the T2 assistant director, and that person will help you kind of make sure that you're contacting the right people, you're involving stakeholders in your project, and then how are you keeping track of your project even beyond the research phase. So that's important to note. Also, like I said, you must reach at least a third level of technology readiness for us to be able to consider your project. In that process, you need to identify 2 relevant stakeholders. So previously we had more, but we've kind of reduced it because every project will be very different. But they need to be 2 relevant stakeholders that are non-academic, that you'll already identify in this process. It could, and you can have conversations with, they could be, people who are providing data, they could be people who are mentoring, there are people who are actually collaborating on the research, providing match funding. It could be any sort of collaboration that you have with that stakeholder, but they need to be non-academic and you need to have at least 2. And then your technology transfer, like I said, needs to be considered in the proposal phase, the research phase, the post-research, and the implementation. So you have a holistic picture of how you're going to make sure that your research is creating impact. And does it have tangible outputs or products? What are the outcomes of those outputs? How are you disseminating them? How are people reacting to them? And then are there agencies out there that are ready to implement them? And then so we're expecting different sorts of phases of technology readiness. And if you have a project that you feel is in a phase where it's above 6, you can propose a longer timeline because now you're ready for that implementation phase, and then divide your proposal into phases. So for example, your first year could be maybe research, and then 6 more months could be implementation, or another year could be implementation, and you can phase out your budget and your research that way, and then we would fund you accordingly. And also those that are below 6, that doesn't mean that you're, once that's the only option you have, that you have to just do 1 year of research. You do your 1 year of research, but then after that, based on the technology readiness that you've reached and your conversations with your T2 assistant director, you can apply for more funding to carry out more technology transfer and more dissemination of your research, and maybe conduct these meetings and things like that. So this is an ongoing process for each project, and we want to be able to be flexible with the requirements of each project, but also keeping in mind that each project is delivering something tangible for us to be able to report to the U.S. Department of Transportation. So this is technology transfer for you, and like I said, if you have any questions, please do feel free to type them out. So some of the potential stakeholders that you can get in contact with, of course, are private industry firms and organizations. This is something US DOT loves right now. The state government, federal government, local government, of course, NPOs, commissions, transit agencies, foundations, and nonprofit organizations, and non-governmental and civic organizations as well. So these are the type of stakeholders we're looking for in your proposal. And when I said that you have to identify 2, at least 2, so these are some of the examples that you can use. Some of the funding priorities are as follows. So lower funding, like I said, it will be between $65,000 to $150,000. Lower funding will be given to single PI, single institute. Middle kind of round will be multiple PIs, single institute, and higher funding will be those that have multiple PIs and multiple institutes. We've had a few examples of that in the previous round, and we encourage that sort of collaboration more. Other factors to consider is that if it involves junior untenured faculty in the research process, interdisciplinary and or external collaboration. So, you're collaborating not within PIs within your own institute, but also with other institutes. Include student training, and then have at least level 3 of technology readiness. Of course, higher TRL levels will receive higher funding and based on their project readiness. And also, if you involve members of underrepresented populations. So your evaluation criteria will be internal and external. Internally, these are some of the things we're looking for. Does it fit the RFP objectives? Does it fit any of the focus areas? This is very, very important. You need to make sure that at least one or more focus areas are being ticked in your proposal. What extent is transportation the focus? What extent does the proposal support and mentor students? Are there untenured junior faculty involved? To what extent does the proposal leverage match fundings and have external stakeholder involvement? Does it support substantive and meaningful collaboration, multidisciplinary and multi-campus to collaboration? Is it relevant nationally? Does it support equity and diversity? And then does the proposal reach the required tech transfer readiness and propose a viable technology transfer plan? And at this stage, we don't expect you to be completely accurate in your plan, but the questions will be are asked as such for you to be able to start thinking about these things and have more direction. And the more direction you have, the easier it is for us to understand, how this project is going to be creating that impact. What is the TI's past performance on other UTC projects, on time reporting, etc. So, like I said, a lot of you are people who have already worked with us before. So, based on your reporting requirements and your, how responsive you were to our requests and updates and invoices and things like that, and we will be basing our decisions on that. The external criteria, this is where we send it out to peer reviewers and practitioner and an academic. It's usually 2 per proposal. They will be reviewing your proposal on these items: alignment to CTEDD objectives, focus areas, applicability of outcomes, the methodology. The methodology is really important. We had some comments last time in the last round where the methodology didn't seem clear to some reviewers, or they thought it was too small of a scope or too large of a scope. So just make sure that your methodology reflects your time period and the scope of your project. Resources and collaboration, of course, intellectual merit, innovation, what your project is adding to the field, and viability of proposed tech transfer activities. And I'm going to go through all of the questions so that you have a better idea. Broader impact, and the qualifications of all of your researchers involved. It's important to note that your completed package of proposals should be submitted prior to the deadline, which is March 27, 2019. Incomplete packages and late proposals will not be sent to external reviewers. All should include match commitment letters, and I'm going to show you an example of that. And this time we're going to have your Office of Grants and Contracts submit these proposals, because we want to make sure that your Office of Grants and Contracts is aware of your budgeting and has approved the budget and all your match and strategic commitments and things like that, so that we don't have to follow up with them. And sometimes we've had cases where the Office of Grants has not been aware that their PI is submitting something, or and the budget has not been approved. So just to kind of smoothen out this process, we want to make sure that your Office of Grants and Contracts is on board with this and has approved. And this also includes UTA. These are some important dates. March 27th is the complete proposal and budget submission, and with your match commitment letters. March to April, we will be doing the review, feedback, and task orders. And May 2019, we should be having the Office of Grants and Contracts do the setup for all the ones that have been selected. And June 1st, 2019 is our target date to start the project. And we're starting the summer, and we're hoping that you can have GRAs for the summer semester. The length of the proposal should not exceed 20 pages, and then, like we said, it should be reviewed by your institution. And for both cash and match commitment letters for both cash and in-kind match amounts proposed in your budget should also be reviewed by the institution. So I'm gonna, before I go into questions, I'm gonna share the proposal itself. Okay, so, this is the actual RFP that was sent out. I'm just gonna really quickly go over this. The objectives are there, the focus areas are there. The new RFP, what's new in this RFP is it shows the technology transfer, all of the things I've already mentioned, and then there's a link to the guidelines that you can read. These are all the stakeholders that you can consider. This talks about project eligibility that I've already mentioned, and then evaluation criteria, and then budgeting, and some other considerations. Again, these are things I've already mentioned in the PowerPoint, but these are for your reference on the RFP. So again, this is very simple. Your project title, the PI, co-PIs, proposal information, what you're asking from CTEDD, how many students will be involved, undergrad, master's, PhD, and then how many of them are underrepresented members. You can also include yourself if you're an underrepresented member, and then whether this project supports tenure or untenured faculty. And then your match sources, you need to make sure that it is 50% of your match. That's the requirement of USDOT. So if, for example, you're asking for $65,000, it needs to be 50% of that, and that will be in addition to the $65,000 that you are asking for. So then this area is the new part where we're asking you to name 2 stakeholders at least. And what we're asking is like their name, how they were contacted, and what their contribution to the project would be. It could be whether at this phase or a later phase. And then you've got your abstract. Your keywords are any words that you would find would put on the website for us to be able to make search your project. Your research focus areas, how your objectives meet the CTEDD's objectives. It's important to have your background in literature review, your methodology. We've given it 2 pages this time because we want you to really focus on your methodology. Of course, your task schedule and expected deliverables. You know, what you're hoping to achieve and when throughout the year. And then this is a technology transfer question. So you're going to talk about your activity that will be carried out, whether it be at the research phase, the post-research phase, or like the implementation phase. It's important to talk about all phases at this point, and so that, and like I said, look at a holistic picture. Describe how this project is supporting multidisciplinary cross-institutional collaboration. What organizations, so the organizations that you mentioned before, you're going to talk about how in detail in this question about their contribution to the project. What new research technology or process will be produced? So this is, you know, something you really need to consider, like what are the outputs? Publications, conference papers, presentations, policy papers, if it's a website, methodologies, technologies or techniques, inventions, patents, licenses, application software, educational aids, courses, instruments, equipment, or research material. I know the standard would be publications and conference papers, but we're really trying to look beyond that and see what other items you're producing and how there's going, like I said, going to be creating impact. How will the results of this project be implemented, and what long-lasting benefits would they have on future research or practice? And what are the expected impacts of research, and where does it stand with respect to technology readiness level? So how would you rate yourself? Would you give yourself a 3 or 4, not yourself but your project, like 4 or 5, based on the technology readiness? And what levels of readiness are expected to be achieved during the research, post-research, and post-tech transfer phases? So you can talk about what is the maximum level you're hoping to achieve through this project. Then we talk about intellectual merit, innovation, education, workforce development, and how your project contributes to all of these items. Your qualifications and team scores, who are the PIs and co-PIs, and of course even the students involved. And your CVs, let's just limit it to 2 pages per person, and then your match funding. So for match funding, I'm gonna go real quick to the template. Okay, So this is just an example. Usually you have the logo of the organization you're getting your match funding from, the date, the name, organization, and our address, and then CTEDD match from. Then you need to confirm support for the organization, proposed study, and then the amount of cash or if that is being contributed. This is for the cash match template. And we also have another one for non-cash match. And then your, name and signature and all of that. It's very simple, and a lot of your Office of Grants and Contracts have submitted something similar before, so you can get in touch with them and they can probably make this for you. And then your in-kind match template would look something like this. This is an example from our department at ETA. And then again, we talk about all of that, the name, your organization, and then the title of your project, and then the in-kind match amount. And again, this could be from your own department, or this could be an external stakeholder as well, and then the letter can be from them. And you can provide this example to them so that they know exactly what they're supposed to be writing. And that should be the letter itself. Now, I'm going to go to the questions. So I already have a couple of questions that some people have typed. Can the entire project focus be on tech transfer or previously developed research projects, or does it need to have a new research component? That's a good question. If your project is actually at readiness of 6, that means that you probably already have developed your research for it, and you're kind of looking for implementing your project. So yes, you can have a tech transfer focused research project. Yes, for sure. And then can we have some sample proposals? Yes, I can definitely send some samples your way. We've done that before too, and then you can get an idea of what based on what we approved the proposals. But keep in mind that this is a new component, so the previous answer proposals won't have these answers. They will have a different sort of technology transfer component in them. But I can send them to you and so that you can have a little bit of an idea of what we're expecting. And also just to go back on the question about having a new research component, we just need to make sure that your project is still adding value to the field. Even if it's through technology transfer, you don't want to completely just copy something from before, but it needs to be have some innovative element on that, and that's what we're looking for. And the rest of it will also be based on what the external reviewers think about it, and whether it answers all the components. So as long as you're answering all the external and internal evaluation components on your proposal, you should be fine. Does anyone have any other questions that I can answer at this point? No more questions? I hope that everyone understood the technology readiness component. I know it's a little bit new and confusing, but if at any point you have any questions about it, please feel free to email me. The email addresses that you see on the screen, you can email any one of those, and we'll respond. And like I said, please do get in contact with your executive committee members, and they've already been informed about this process, and they should be able to help you out. So, we're doing this so that, we can make sure that we are reporting the right sort of things to, the U.S. Department of Transportation. I have another question about, can you share this PowerPoint file? Yes, I will be sharing this PowerPoint file. Also, we will be having another, information session sometime maybe end of this month or beginning of next month, because we still have time for the deadline. And in the meantime, like I said, if you want to get in contact with any of us, you can. And I think in that one, Dr. Hamidi will also be, answering some questions, and she might be able to give you more detailed answers, to your questions. And also, please try to share this RFP with as many people in your campuses as possible, anyone you might feel is interested in transportation research, because we would love to have some, innovative research proposals. Any other questions? Okay, so I don't think there's any more questions, anyone, but if, like I said, you have any, you can definitely email me or call me. The 817-272-5138 number is mine. And I will try to answer as much as possible. And, thank you for attending this information session, and we look forward to receiving your research proposals. Thank you. Bye.